The tank sat in the middle of the base like a monument to frustration. Its massive body cast a long shadow over the concrete, silent and still, like a sleeping beast that refused to wake up. The base's main repair bay, usually filled with the sounds of tools clanging and engines rumbling, had gone quiet around it. Mechanics walked by and stared, some with blank faces, others shaking their heads as they passed. It wasn't just a broken machine. It was a symbol of everything that was going wrong. For weeks, a rotating team of military engineers and skilled mechanics had tried everything to bring the old battle tank back to life. At first, everyone was excited. This was one of the Army's legendary models. Heavy, powerful, once unstoppable. It had served in 2 wars, held a line when others fell, and made it home when many didn't. The plan was to restore it, maybe even get it parade ready, or use it for training. But something was off from the start. The systems didn't respond. The power refused to cycle. Sensors lit up one moment and went dark the next. Computers showed errors no one had seen before. The men assigned to the project were some of the best on base. They knew machines like the backs of their hands. They worked in shifts around the clock, ran tests, replaced wires, drained and refilled systems, swapped out panels, pulled every trick they knew. But every time they thought they were getting close, something else would break. One day the electronics would flash back on, only for the main gun stabilizer to fail. Fix that, and the transmission would lock up. It was like the tank itself was rejecting the help, like it didn't trust them. Over time, hope turned into routine, then into annoyance, and finally, defeat. A month in, they started calling it the ghost tank, not because it was haunted, but because no one could explain why it wouldn't work. It just sat there, cold, unmoving, angry even. The crew that had started with so much energy now just did the bare minimum. The commanding officer who had assigned the project had been hopeful at first, saying the tank deserved a second chance. Now, he was reconsidering that entirely. With tight budgets and stricter priorities, even something as historic as this tank couldn't waste time and manpower forever. He called the mechanics into a briefing room and said what they all feared. If it's not operational by next week, we're scrapping it. I'll file the paperwork. It hit the team hard. Not because they hadn't tried, but because deep down, they felt like they'd failed something bigger than themselves. This wasn't just a machine. It was part of something older, tougher, meaningful. But logic is logic, and orders are orders. That evening, the sun began to dip behind the far fence line. A soft orange light spread across the base, painting long shadows across the concrete. The tank, still parked near the hangar's open bay doors, sat in silence. A couple of young mechanics lingered nearby, half-heartedly tightening bolts, pretending to work though they had already given up inside. Then someone noticed a figure walking toward them. He wasn't wearing a uniform, just an old canvas jacket, faded cargo pants, and boots that had seen better days. On his head, a cap stained from sun and sweat, with an old army patch barely visible. He wasn't fast, didn't walk with any kind of rush, but there was something in his step, firm, grounded, like he'd walked this path before many times. The mechanics turned and looked at him with curiosity. One of them asked, "Can I help you, sir?" The man didn't answer right away. His eyes were locked on the tank. He came to a stop about 10 feet away from it, stared at it for a long moment. The kind of stare that wasn't just looking, it was remembering. His jaw was tight, his face marked by years in the sun, and his hands hung quietly by his sides. Then he took a few slow steps forward and placed a hand gently on the tank's armor. His fingers brushed the side of the hull, not like a mechanic checking for damage, but more like someone greeting an old friend. "This one used to be mine," he said quietly. The younger men exchanged glances. One of them let out a short laugh. "You drove this exact tank." The old man didn't smile. "Commanded it," he replied. "She saved a lot of lives, including mine." They were quiet now. Something in his tone shut the jokes down immediately. He didn't sound like someone telling stories for attention. He sounded like someone telling the truth. He stepped back, scanned the exterior, then asked, "Why is she parked here?" One of the mechanics sighed. "Dead. Won't respond. We've been at it for weeks." It's like she's refusing to work. Refusing? The old man echoed. The mechanic nodded. We've changed parts, checked software, rewired everything. Nothing makes sense. It's like every system fights us. The old soldier took another step forward and placed his palm flat against the front plating. He didn't speak for a few seconds. Then he said something strange. She doesn't know you. They stared at him, puzzled. She doesn't trust hands that don't know what she's been through, he added. One of the younger guys crossed his arms. You really think tanks trust people? The man looked at him calmly. You spend enough years in one, you stop seeing them as machines. Without waiting for permission, he began circling the tank. His eyes moved with sharp precision. He stopped at a panel, knocked on it with his knuckles, then opened it with ease. Reached in, adjusted something. Didn't ask where the tools were. Used only what he could find in his pocket. Tightened one bolt, loosened another. Walked around the back, opened another panel, and tapped the side of a fuel line. He wasn't rushing, but he wasn't guessing either. Every movement had purpose. The mechanics watched in silence now. The laughter was gone. This wasn't guesswork. This was muscle memory. For the next hour, the man worked quietly, never asking for help. His hands were steady, even as the daylight began to fade. He didn't use any diagnostic machines. Just a flashlight, a wrench, and his own understanding. Sometimes he'd stop, place a hand somewhere on the tank, close his eyes briefly, then move again. It looked strange, but not stupid. It looked like someone who wasn't working on a machine, but reconnecting with it. Finally, as darkness rolled in and the base lights flickered on, he stepped down from the tank. His hands were greasy now. His knees popped a little as he stood straight. Try it, he said simply. The mechanics hesitated. One of them climbed into the operator's hatch, still skeptical. He flipped the main switch. The usual silence returned, then a low rumble, followed by a loud, deep roar that filled the entire repair bay. The engine had started. The ground vibrated. The lights on the console flicked green. The hydraulics hissed into place. The turret shifted slightly. It was alive. Everyone froze. The mechanic in the seat looked down through the hatch, wide-eyed. It's running. Everything's green. The old man gave a soft nod. She remembers. No one spoke for a moment. Then one of the crew shouted, "Holy hell, he did it!" The others started cheering, clapping, not sure whether to look at the tank or the man who brought it back. But the retired soldier didn't cheer. He just gave the tank one last look, nodded once, and turned to leave. "Wait," one of the mechanics called out. "What's your name?" He paused, hand already reaching for the door. Then he smiled faintly. "Doesn't matter. She knows it." And with that, he walked into the night, leaving behind a roaring machine, a stunned crew, and a memory that none of them will forget. The sound of the tank's engine filled the bay long after the old man had disappeared into the shadows. Even after it was shut down, the hum seemed to echo in their bones. Not from the noise, but from the weight of what had just happened. The crew stood in silence, still staring at the machine like it had just come back from the dead. No one knew quite what to say. The man had come out of nowhere, hadn't introduced himself, hadn't asked for permission, hadn't explained much. And yet, in less than 2 hours, he had solved something the best trained mechanics on base couldn't fix in weeks. Later that night, a few of the crew stayed behind, just sitting on crates near the tank, still trying to wrap their heads around it. One of the younger guys, Rodriguez, shook his head and muttered, "That wasn't just a fix. That was something else, like spiritual." His buddy laughed lightly. "You going soft on me?" "No, man. I'm serious." It was like he didn't just fix the tank. He spoke to it. They fell quiet again. Everyone was thinking the same thing, even if no one wanted to say it out loud. That old man knew this tank. Not just the model, this one specifically. And the way he touched it, like he was reconnecting with a memory buried deep in the steel. The next morning, word had already spread across the base. By sunrise, officers were asking questions. Who started the tank? Who authorized the changes? The commander in charge of the project looked over the maintenance report. All it said was, power restored, functional, unknown external assistance. When the base commander heard that, he didn't get angry. He just looked out the window toward the tank and said, "Find out who it was." But there was no file, no visitor log, no security footage showing his face clearly. The cameras near the hangar had been down for maintenance. Ironically, at the time he arrived, he hadn't signed in. He hadn't left a name. It was like he walked in and disappeared just as quickly. A ghost, a guardian. A few of the older officers, those with gray in their beards and years in their eyes, said they remembered hearing about a man like that. A commander from 20, maybe 30 years ago. A legend on wheels. There was a story that during a mission overseas, one tank stayed behind to cover retreat, holding the line until backup could arrive. The man in command of that tank refused to abandon it. He and his crew held out for hours, surrounded, outgunned, low on fuel. And somehow they survived. That tank had a name etched into the side, one that had been painted over since. But maybe this was that same tank. As for the old soldier, no one could confirm anything. But people started telling stories, the kind that grow with every retelling. One mechanic said the man had whispered something to the engine before it started. Another claimed he saw him wipe away a tear as he touched the main gun. It was all secondhand, all a bit blurry. But what remained true was this: the tank was alive again, and someone had brought it back with more than just tools. From that point on, everything changed. The project to scrap the tank was canceled immediately. The commanding officer reinstated full support for its restoration. But now, there was a sense of reverence around it. Mechanics approached it with quiet respect. Some even touched the armor before working, like a silent greeting. No one joked about the ghost tank anymore. Now they called it her, like she had a soul. The strange part was, things worked better after that. Repairs that had once gone wrong now went smoothly. Parts fit more easily. Diagnostics made sense. It was almost like the tank had finally accepted its new caretakers. Not because they were better, but because they understood what she'd been through. Thanks to him. A few days later, while cleaning the interior, one of the mechanics found something wedged under the operator's seat. A small patch, frayed at the edges, almost lost to time. It had the name Morris stitched into it. No rank, just a name. The patch was old, faded and stained, but it told them everything. They went through the old base records. There it was. Captain Thomas Morris, tank commander, retired 22 years ago. No living address listed. Last known post, classified mission, desert operations. Multiple commendations, honors, and then silence. The team printed the file, placed it in a folder, and set it on a small table beside the tank. One of them whispered, "Thank you, sir," as they closed the binder. Weeks passed, and the tank was finally ready. Fully restored, fully operational. It didn't just run, it roared. Stronger, louder, prouder than before. They rolled it out onto the training field for a test. Soldiers gathered to watch, curious. It wasn't just a demonstration. It was a resurrection. The gunner reported perfect aim. The driver said the controls felt smoother than any modern tank he'd handled. Even the navigation systems, which had given them so much trouble before, now responded like they had been waiting all this time to be used again. After the run, the base commander walked up to the crew and said, "Put on reserve duty. Keep it clean. Keep it ready. And never call a relic again." That tank had gone from scrap metal to legend again. Not because of new technology. Not because of a full crew. But because one man had remembered what it was. Who it was. And treated it not like a machine, but like a comrade. Months later, on Veterans Day, the base hosted a memorial ceremony. Rows of soldiers stood in formation. Flags waved in the wind. Names were read. Stories were told. And at the edge of the ceremony grounds, the tank stood, clean, polished, gleaming in the sun. A small metal plaque had been placed in front of it. It read, "In honor of Captain Thomas Morris, for what he gave and what he gave back." No one ever saw the old man again. But every time that tank rolled out for testing or training, someone would say quietly, "He's still with her." And somehow you could feel it, in the way the engine purred, in the way the ground trembled, in the way the crew saluted when they passed by, because some machines aren't just steel and bolts. Some carry history, some carry ghosts, and sometimes those ghosts come back just to make sure we remember who they were.